Welcome to Beyond the Headlights,
where we turn our pain into purpose
and raise our voices against drunk driving. I'm Destiny.
And I'm Jennifer. And today I'm going to start with a quote because it segues into the story that we're about to share. And it's from a offender's wife. And it was a prison phone call, like your first call. And she says to the offender, "You were probably driving like a nut, like I always tell you you do. And you don't listen to me. Instead, you just yell at me." So this story that we're going to cover is about the Gaudreau brothers, who were the hockey players who were killed in August 29th, 2024. Yeah. So we're going to cover that story, and we're going to talk about how they are still fighting it from 2024. And there's been some interesting things that have happened along the way. Mm-hmm. The offender, he admitted to consuming alcohol that day. He had 5 or 6 beers. He was drinking them in the car. He had open containers in the car. He failed his field sobriety test, but he blamed it on having a bad knee. And when the prosecutor was asking him questions, he said the reason for the alcohol consumption was because he was having an upsetting conversation with his mom, and it was about a family matter. Excuse me. And then he had a 2-hour phone call while he was driving around in his Jeep with a friend, like kind of venting and drinking and venting and drinking. And so while driving, and that was the reason that he was driving erratically and aggressively, because of the upsetting phone call from his mom. So excuse.
I can't help but think, though, like as a mom myself, how cruddy his mom has to feel knowing that he used her as his excuse instead of taking accountability.
Right. Or his wife. Like, I've told you and I've told you, and you're still driving like an idiot, and now you've killed 2 people and you're sitting in jail. So serves you right. You know? Yeah. You'd be a little bit spiteful. So
Hang on, before we keep going, can you tell people more about the Gaudreau brothers?
Yes, I'm going to go backwards, but I wanted to start with the excuses. Okay. Because that's so typical of this type of behavior. There's always a reason why they're doing it, and that's always the first thing that comes up instead of the victims' names. And so I think it's important that we talk about their story, and I will definitely do that. So what happened on August 29th, 2024 was the brothers were in town for their sister's wedding, and it was the day before. So I imagine they were doing groomsmen stuff. Yeah, the rehearsal, and they had been drinking. The defense is going to use that as an excuse for what happened, again, because there's excuses. But they were on the side of the road. They were driving. They were riding in a single file line, one in front of the other, and they were not swerving. On bicycles. There was no evidence. There were tons of witnesses. And the driver, the offender, was behind a car that was going like 50 miles an hour, and he was drinking, and he was already angry, and he had a history of road rage issues. So he's behind this driver who's just going a tiny bit over the speed limit. It wasn't fast enough for him. And when she saw, and I say she, I don't know if it was a she or he. I don't know who was driving that car. But whoever was driving swerved over to the left a little bit to give the biker some room. Yeah. And he saw it as an opportunity. He accelerated and passed illegally on the right side and hit the brothers. There was no skid marks, no braking. He just plowed them down and continued to drive for another quarter mile when his car died or something. That's where the police found him.
So he didn't stop automatically.
He didn't stop automatically. And there's reason to believe, because there's no swerving or skidding, that he didn't see them at all, because he was probably just blind ragey, and intoxicated.
Yeah. And it's like, this wasn't intentional for him to necessarily hit them and kill them, but it just shows that, like, your choices have real consequences. You know what I mean? And even though it wasn't intentional, you still made an intentional choice to be irresponsible.
And sorry doesn't cut it. Yeah. You've taken 2 lives now. Yeah. So nothing, the excuse of failing the field sobriety because he had bad knees doesn't cut it. The bad phone call with his mom doesn't cut it. Like, there's nothing you can say at that point.
It's not going to heal the wives' like hearts or the kids, you know, that are waiting for their dad to come home at night.
Of course.
It's not.
And speaking of the wives, both of them were pregnant with baby boys. In fact, one of the wives announced her pregnancy during her eulogy at the funeral. She announced that she was 9 weeks pregnant.
Literally gives me chills.
It's horrible.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, horrible. And also a blessing that they're having little boys that, it never replaces anybody. It might serve as like a salve.
Like a reason to continue.
Yeah. One gave birth within 4 months of her husband's death, and the other was just recently.
And it's like he not only robbed them of like the future that they could have with like their spouse or their dad or whatever, but like he robbed them of like the pregnancy too. You know, like that's supposed to be such like a special moment that you get to share with your spouse or like significant other. And
they were
the stress,
giving
and
birth, and just.
And just being alone during that process, like it just shows like the ripple, like it goes on so much further than just it initially happening.
It does. So one of the wives that was going to be her third child.
Okay.
The other, it was their first baby. And thankfully he knew that she was expecting. So at least he knew when he died that he had a little one on the way. And she said in a post she made that he had tears in his eyes when he got the pregnancy test, and so he obviously
so eager
was
to be a dad,
and ready to be a dad. They had a bridal shower, probably for that wife, that the theme was something to the effect of heaven, something about heaven. I wish I would have wrote it down, but that was the theme. So there was a lot of like balloons, and it was just really peaceful and pretty, and they honored the baby's dad in that regard by making it first day in heaven, or it's heavenly I don't remember how.
That is so sweet.
Yeah, it was very sweet. So the sister that was supposed to be getting married, she postponed the wedding.
Yeah, like how could you continue on?
Yeah, and I worry her new date is July of this year, so a couple weeks, and I just worry like every moment of this leading up to it she will replay.
It takes away her fun.
It
takes away her amazing memories.
It does. What a special day turned into such a nightmare. But on her wedding ring she had their initials engraved, so they'll be part of the day too, which was a beautiful way to honor them. I've heard of people, my sister got married a couple months after Grace, and she had a locket with Grace's picture sewn into the flowers. So she was part of the bouquet. It doesn't make it any easier, but you feel like at least a part of them is there with you,
and it's comforting for those people that were left behind.
It is. We struggle so much with making sure that they're not forgotten. And I know that my mom reassured me last night on the phone that she will not be forgotten. Yes. Your family will never be forgotten, but it's still a fear.
It's a fear because they meant so much to us. And the thought of like them truly being gone forever, like wiped and erased from the world, like that just doesn't seem possible because they meant so much to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Johnny Gaudreau was known as Johnny Hockey. A little bit of history about him because I think it needs to be celebrated. He was starting his third season with the Columbus Blue Jackets after 8 seasons as a Calgary Flame.
That's a hard one.
That's a hard one. He also played hockey at Boston College, which is where his brother also played hockey. And his brother was working as a hockey coach. So he was passing on, his love of hockey to younger kids. The offender, and we always hate to talk about the offender too much because it's important to focus on the victims and their families more. Yeah. But an interesting aspect of this case is that the offender was charged with 2 counts of reckless vehicular homicide and aggravated manslaughter, along with evidence tampering and leaving the scene of the crime. And like I said, he failed his field sobriety test because, quote, a bad knee. Yeah. He was recovering from a knee surgery.
Well, that and with him tampering with things, it goes to show that, like, he knew what he had done was wrong and he was trying to hide it. Right. You know what I mean? Tampering. Like, he knew. Right. He knew the moment it happened.
Yeah, and he admitted to the police on scene that he had been drinking. He according to him, had 5 or 6 while he was driving. And again, said it was because of the upsetting call from his mom. The court records state that the police could not find tire marks or skid marks, like I said, and there was no attempt to break or avoid a collision. So when it came time to start the trial, his attorneys were pulling out all the stops. Yeah. First, they said that, and I understand that defense attorneys are paid to find the loopholes, right? So the first thing that they said was because the accident happened at 8:15 in the evening, and it was in April. It was in sooner. August. Sorry, Grace was in April. It was in August, so it still should have been light enough that they could have been seen. But the defense attorney said that they didn't have lights on their headlights. Any headlights on their bike. I'm sorry. And so that's the reason that he hit them, because there was no headlights. And then the second reason, which kind of shocked everybody who was following the case, the defense attorney pulled up the fact that the brothers had been drinking and their blood alcohol content was actually higher than the offenders. Yeah. So the judge even made the comment that the brothers were not on trial, that he was on trial.
It's irrelevant.
It is irrelevant. In a car. Right. But they pointed out over and over that one of the brothers was at .134 and the other was at 127, where the offender was at .087. So he, quote, was just barely over the limit, where the brothers were quite a bit more over the limit. So thankfully, the judge said that's irrelevant and I'm not listening to it. And he continued on with the trial as is. So that was a big victory, because sometimes in these cases, the judges make questionable choices that end up making it easier for the offender to get away with it.
Yeah.
So the bad thing is too, and we both were fortunate, that's a weird choice of words, but we were fortunate, I guess, that we didn't have to sit through a courtroom case, because while the offender's attorneys are arguing with this, the poor family sitting there like, why are you trying to pull their names down?
Jen last week ended up sharing, like, in the courtroom, like, you're not allowed to make like a sound or a face or have a reaction, and I struggle to imagine a way that I couldn't, or that I could be emotionless, you know what I mean? On something that has been so emotional the last 10 years.
Right. She said the victims or their families are not supposed to cry. They're not supposed to obviously do outburst. But how do you not cry? Yeah. Especially when and granted, sometimes the court cases are delayed and there's a long period of time, but still that's your loved one, and that heightened anxiety of everything would make me an emotional wreck.
I feel like you have to almost get to a point of being able to detach and disassociate just to take care of yourself.
Right.
And I think that has been probably one of my biggest coping mechanisms, healthy or not, just detaching and disassociating. So I can take myself somewhere else for my own situation. Yeah. But I couldn't do that for yours. You know what I mean? It's only my own story.
Right. Right. And there's so much truth to that. And I imagine that they were probably trying to practice that same bit of detachment. And I would also imagine with the
hormones
wedding
too, like being pregnant, like in a new baby, or just being pregnant, like the hormones, and the poor family, like preparing for this wedding still and having to go through this, like they were just robbed of so much. It wasn't fair, and it was preventable.
Yeah. Well, the family's attorney, so the prosecuting attorney, I guess is what I'm saying, tried to argue, and he didn't even really need to say anything, because it sounds like the judge was like, yeah, that's stupid. But they said that the facts were that he was intentionally reckless and he left the scene. So regardless of what you're trying to say about the brothers, you still did, you still did wrong, and there's nothing that would erase that.
Right.
So the case continued on despite the prosecutor, the defendant's attorneys trying to push that. And I still think it's rotten that they put it out in the universe, because for anybody to Google to see that they had it. And again, it wasn't illegal to drink. It wasn't, they didn't get behind the wheel of a motorized vehicle.
They were still in the bike lane, on
they
their
were
shoulder.
Still innocent.
They were still being safe.
Right. So they will have another hearing June 10th as it proceeds forward. And, you just think their names, I'm sure, had a lot to do with the speed of the trial.
Yeah,
because there are people that we know that have not even had their first hearing yet, and it happened a year ago. And I'm not saying that in any disrespect towards the family. I'm glad it's going this fast for them. But there was a quote from one of the wives that I wanted to read, because it just will pull the story to the end result, and then you can talk about the case that you have. But she said this at the funeral, and I felt like what an amazing bit of composure she had, that she could even say this at the funeral. But she summed up her eulogy by saying, "I urge everyone to never drink and drive. Call for a ride. Please don't put another family through this torture. The loss of Maddie and John will leave a hole in our family with his close friends and this community for eternity."
Yeah, and it's being so influential like they were too, like it has, I feel like, a bigger ripple, like not that everyone isn't important, because they are, but they already were known by so many more people, and that ripple just goes so much further, you know. And I'm somebody who always likes to sit and think, like, did that guy have a DWI before, or was this like a past history, you know what I mean? And
I think when we did our original research, so we did research a couple months ago on this case, and I think in the original research we did find that he had a previous one that was dismissed for some reason. Yeah,
in that state, there's a loophole that, like, if the cop for whatever reason isn't able to go to the court hearing for the DWI sentencing, it somehow falls off.
Yeah, and this was in New Jersey. So
okay, New Jersey, yeah. So, well, on his record, he doesn't have anything, but in reality, he had a history in the past.
Right, and that happens more times than not. I think people would be shocked at the number of times the DWI was either pleaded down to a lesser charge, or they had a great attorney who just got it erased with a lot of money. And I think that when we've talked about first offenses and mandatory interlock systems, I think that that's fine. If you don't want to put the DWI on CaseNet or whatever, for whatever reason, fine, don't. But still make that interlock system be a priority. So at least there's a buffer to keep them from re-offending.
There's a long inconvenience that would make them think twice and protect not only them, but all the people around them, because they can't make those good choices apparently for themselves.
Right. And when we talked about the cases that we're going to take to the legislators, and I told you that Cecilia Williams had a bill that she wants for the child support if you kill a mom and dad and leave the kids behind. She said at one point, and I thought this was so profound, I don't care what you call it, just enact it, because she wants it named Bentley's Law.
Yeah.
And then there was some like back and forth, like, no, we're going to call it something else. And she said, I don't care what you call it, just pass it, because it's important. Yeah. It's a deterrent. And so I think this is the same situation. Like, don't call it a DWI or don't, who cares? Put the interlock system in their car, continue to monitor them for whatever period of time to make sure they don't reoffend, and right there you're saving lives.
Absolutely. I feel like it's so easy oftentimes for the judges or whoever just to hand out like probation or suspending a license or this or that, but at the end of the day, like, there still has to be some more accountability, you know, like real time in the moment, because we can't hold them to make the right choices themselves.
Right. So do it statistically. Like, just do the research and figure out, does suspending a license actually reduce the number of DWIs? I think you'll find that it does not. Mm-hmm. You'll get 2 charges instead of just the one. You'll have a driving while suspended or revoked and also a DWI. Yeah. So what did that stop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it keeps them in the court system longer, but that's about it, you know? So I'm going to cover a case that is with a bride and groom that was a high-profile case that the media picked up a ton. So most people have probably already heard about it, but there's been more things that have happened in the case that we can share and talk about a little more. So in 2023 in South Carolina, Samantha Miller was getting married to her new husband, Eric Hutchinson. She was 34 years old. She was an elementary school teacher who was super active in her community, just all around a really good person. Her family said that she had a vibrant personality and was just super kind. They just described her multiple times as being one of the kindest people that you could meet. Her husband was an entrepreneur who was passionate for work and his love for outdoor activities. He did lots of community service and just loved spending time with family. They were eager to start their family together, but that came to a halt when, after their wedding ceremony, they were going from the ceremony to the reception, taking a golf cart. It was Samantha and Eric, and then 2 people that were also in their wedding. One of them was a brother and another family member. When they were hit by a young girl, 25 years old, Jamie Komorowski. She had a history of reckless behavior, and she hit them on this golf cart.
You know what? I'm going to pause you for a second, because I know we've talked before about people using the excuse. Sorry, I'm really on excuses today. But people saying, oh, it was her first time drinking and driving, and oh, she never did this kind of stuff. But I think that in both of these stories, both people had a history of reckless behavior. And so I tend to think that it's probably more times than not that it's the person who is doing it very frequently. It's usually not the person that does it for the very first time. It's just their very first time getting caught. And we've said that on this podcast before.
And it's something to where, we say it, I feel like every other time that, somebody who gets a DWI or gets caught, on average, before they get caught their first time anyway, they've driven drunk, usually over 80 times. It's not their first time. And so oftentimes I think that they get to feeling like, hey, I've done this so many times, I'm good at it. But in reality, it's not a matter of if you're going to hurt somebody or yourself or get caught. It's just a matter of when, because it is irresponsible and reckless.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I just was thinking that's odd that we have 2 cases that both are very willing to say, there's some reckless behavior in their past. Yeah. Because usually it's the opposite. It's just, they were so good, so perfect.
So going back to Jamie, we don't like to give a lot of attention to the offenders, but I feel like it's important oftentimes to know their background, to know the kind of person that they were or what took them to get to this point.
Right.
But there weren't any mention of previous DUI arrests, but there were plenty of traffic violations, including speeding tickets and instances of reckless driving. And then in her social media, which would be common, I feel like, for a 25-year-old girl, it oftentimes had a lifestyle that included partying and alcohol consumption, which then again would help contribute to her reckless behavior.
Right.
Some witnesses reported seeing her driving erratically prior to the accident. She had ended up going out with some friends from work. The friends from work were done drinking and she wanted to go, stopped in at another bar on her way after already drinking with them, and that is when this happened.
Yeah.
It was in a pretty heavily populated area.
I bet she kicks herself for not just going home when she should have.
Well, you would think so, but there were also videos on TikTok and just online that were leaked to the news and stuff of phone calls that she made to her dad, who was wealthier, that she wasn't necessarily, it didn't make her sound necessarily remorseful, but it was more so get me out of this.
So they were prison calls?
Yeah, they were prison calls, jailhouse calls, and it was video. You could see her face, and she was more so crying to her dad and her boyfriend, just saying I can't believe I'm going to be getting this much time, X, Y, and Z time for this. Get me out of this. Do whatever it takes, pay how much it takes to get me out. But I feel oftentimes once this is picked up by the news as much as it is, or it doesn't matter who you are eventually. Like, if enough attention is brought to a case, there is no getting out of it.
Right.
But when a case doesn't get enough attention, oftentimes that does work. It's all about who you know and how much money you can throw at it.
That's true. And that's why this podcast is so important. Our documentary is so important. Yeah. And just the connections that we've made along the way are so important, because I think we have to continue to show that spotlight on these cases. So every victim is given a chance to have some kind of justice. I don't know. We had this nasty first attorney, and I would love to say his name on here, but I'm not going to do that yet. I probably will someday, but I won't do that yet.
Not yet.
He kept asking me, and this was right at the beginning. Grace was only gone like a couple months, and his comment was always, when I would say, I just want justice, his response was always, well, what is justice? Well, I don't know. Maybe holding somebody responsible is justice.
Somebody accountable.
Yeah. Like it would make me so angry, and it made me feel about this big, because you're the attorney, and it felt very much like he was talking down to me.
Yeah.
My daughter's dead. What do you think I want? Like, I want anything. Make anything better for me, please, because we are dying with her.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was horrible.
And I've said so many times, too, like, yes, I've pleaded for justice, and going to that Capitol when I walked in and, like, just started sobbing, it's because, like, I knew every single person behind those doors has the ability to make the justice that I need to, like, sleep better at night happen, and we're still begging to be heard at the end of the day. Like, we as the victims almost feel punished, especially once the person that killed our family members died too.
And they throw so much money at these cases. There's such a likelihood of these offenders getting off and getting free with hardly any consequences, and we're left with our lives shattered.
Yeah.
There's no Band-Aid that you can put on our situations that's going to make it better. So going back to putting these stories out there and talking about them, and not so much the offenders, but the victims, and how this could actually change. We could actually see this become not a thing at some point, someday, if we continue to shine the light on the offenders and say, you're not going to get away with this.
Yeah. Well, that, and like we've also discussed oftentimes too, like if a county, like a police department would just like spotlight their weekly arrests, then it could bring a little shame or embarrassment to the arrest, and it could just be DWIs or honestly any arrest that's made for that week.
And go ahead and put guilty until proven innocent. Yeah, go ahead and put something, there's a disclaimer, allegedly drink and drive on this date. That's fine. Put that on there. But show their faces and show their names. Let people decide for themselves.
And Warren County, locally here in Missouri, they have shared their arrest records for as long as I can remember. But here just recently, Lincoln County just started too, and it was their first week of releasing it, and I was honestly mortified to see how many DWI arrests were in a week. Like, you don't realize how bad this is until it's printed in front of you, black and white on paper, for it to happen.
But, and not to spread rumors, but I'm going to say this, there's always rumors that people don't get pulled over for DWIs in Lincoln County. So, yay. There were
and
a
honestly,
bunch.
it's probably most counties, because what sob story can you tell? And you know what I mean? Can you justify what you've been doing? Because unfortunately, it's not an important thing to everyone. And it comes with, like what we've said multiple times before, a lot of paperwork and a lot of extra work.
It's
it would be easier to let them drive half a mile or 2 miles back home. But again, I was almost 2 miles away from where I was going when it happened, and your people didn't drive.
The party that they were leaving was a half a mile from the crash.
So, and again, like we went out for Valentine's Day and Ubered, and it was only a mile. And some new people that we had met, acquaintances, they were like, he had been drinking beer, and I was like, we're gonna Uber back, and he's like, but you can ride with us. And I was like, no. And we paid almost $100 round trip for a 3 mile drive.
That's a
and
funny
he would
thing.
go back and tell me like what could happen in a mile. And
and didn't you didn't he make a comment like, it's just a couple beers? I was just having a couple beers.
Just a few. I've only drank beer.
As if the beer part is not alcohol. Yeah. Like it's not a Pepsi. It's actual alcohol.
It's just like the things that people do and say to make it okay in their head.
Right.
That just blows my mind. But then like I almost try to give them a little grace because like before the crash happened to me, like I knew it was bad, but I don't think I realized how bad it was.
Right, I never but you were 21.
I was 21. Yeah, I wasn't.
You were
I
just
wasn't
a
in
baby.
My 30s or 40s.
And I think that it's disgusting, you know, in my situation because the kids that were in the car were all 18 or younger, 18 to 15. Yeah. But you did not live that life. You were not doing those things.
I had never been drunk before 21.
Right.
I had never
so your perception is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's altered.
Because I think you couple the idea of, you know, a kid's invincibility with drinking and driving, they're never going to think anything's going to happen to them.
No.
Especially if they've grown up in a house where their parents have gotten away with it, their older siblings have gotten away with it.
Or
it's
what
a learned
they've
behavior.
Seen growing up. Like, did they go to dinner with their parents and it was normal to have a few fishbowl margaritas because we have margaritas with Mexican kind of thing, you know, like. Or was it normal for these kids to witness beer at dinner? You know, like, what household did they come from?
Yeah, it's all learned behavior. It's what they see and they copy. So going back to the bride, that case has been finalized, has it not?
Yes, it has. So Jamie did end up pleading guilty to the DUI and reckless homicide and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. And so it'll be interesting to see as time goes on, like how much of that 25 years does she serve? Because that's not the norm to be sentenced.
Oh gosh, not at all. In this area, it's like 7 years is the norm.
At most. And
they don't serve that.
No, they serve like
and she pled guilty. So I bet there's going to be some loophole where they say she's taken accountability. She's learned her lesson.
She has good behavior despite those jailhouse calls of zero remorse.
Right. But didn't she give a really tear-filled statement to the court? To the family?
Yeah. She tried to act right, but it was in those moments that she didn't realize people were genuinely watching her that came back to bite her in the butt.
Right. And integrity is what you do when no one's looking. So those calls to her dad where she was just pleading for him to come get her.
She just wanted him to fix it. It wasn't that she was worried about like Eric or Samantha's family or anything. It was just...
But she made it sound good, so that way when the judge listened, he could say, well, but he didn't fall for it.
No,
she still got 25 years.
And the defense or the prosecuting attorney did their job
well.
And good. I feel bad for Eric, too, because it was like questioned for him if the marriage was even legal. So he was going through a nice storm, despite being like wheelchair, crutches back for a long while. Yeah, he was really
injured too.
Because he broke his leg. Then the family members that were on the back of that golf cart were hurt and injured too. But Eric has also had to battle the bride's mom because she was trying to say that because the marriage license was not delivered to the courthouse, he wasn't truly her husband, and she was entitled to the estate.
Yeah,
the money. And with this being a high-profile case and Jamie coming from money, I think that it was just found as an issue, like a way for her to get some money. And it wasn't about that for Eric at all. He just wanted some justice for his wife.
I'm just so thankful that Samantha got to have her wedding.
I know. She was so happy. The last memory is of
a beautiful wedding.
Yeah. She had an amazing time. And she was surrounded by all the people that loved her and supported her. And there was something that Eric ended up sharing, like right before the golf cart was crashed into, that it was like the best day of her life, and she wishes that it would never end and that she could pause time. Wow. And that was like the last thing that she was able to say to him. So I'm sure it's comforting, but it's gut-wrenching.
Absolutely. And then to be fighting with his mother-in-law on top of it. These kind of accidents, crashes, devastation, all the words bring out the worst in some people, also the best in others. But it's amazing how many times, and you said it in your own situation, where there's no money to get, but even that little bit of money, it becomes a fight. Your attorney took 35, over a third 40%, of it.
Mm-hmm.
Disgusting.
And, yeah, it's crazy. And then, you know, and people don't realize, like, it ends up showing people's true colors.
It does.
And they could be super bright and colorful and supportive, or they can be really dark and nasty.
And even in how far they want you, or how fast they want you to recover. You know, they don't want you to be sad all the time. So come on, aren't you feeling better yet? Well, you should feel better by now.
And that goes back to, like, when I was, like, earlier in the stages and I had met my husband, I was so scared living underneath that spotlight. And I'm sure Eric himself is scared as well, and the Gaudreau brothers' wives. Like, people are watching you like a hawk when the media picks it up. And so when I met Brett, like, I reached out to another young widow that was like my hope. You know what I mean? Like, she gave me hope that if she could do this, I could do this.
Sure.
She didn't lose her husband due to a drunk driver, but nonetheless, she still buried her husband. Yeah. And she woke up every day and became super, like, spiritual. And she was just like a light for me. And she told me that it doesn't matter if you wait 10 days or 10 years, you're going to be judged anyways.
Absolutely. Because
you're going to be judged for moving on or moving forward. I hate saying move on.
And it's almost like people don't want to see a happy ending. No. They want to see it miserable. They want to see the drama.
But then if you stay sad too long, they're like, you need to move on with your life already, as if you didn't just bury your entire family.
It's funny how many opinions people have.
And so I just don't really care what anyone thinks anymore. Yeah. It's my own happiness, and I say I don't care. I've become pretty callous, but there's still some things that can wiggle in and get through the cracks and get to me. But most things, like, if it could be said, it has, and it is what it is. So
and you're exactly right. Those mothers are going to be judged for everything they do, and if they do end up in another relationship, and so will this Ethan. Was that Eric? Okay. So will Eric, and there's no right answer. It just you do have to come to a point where you just do what you need to do.
And you're never going to understand what you would do until it happens to you. Because I used to say, even to Corey, that, like, there's no way I would ever be with anyone else. Like, I was going to be with him forever. And then I buried him at 21 along with our child. And, like, was I supposed to be widowed and alone forever? You know, like, I didn't choose this life. It chose me, you know? And so I just was courageous somehow, some way, and put one foot in front of the other and found some hope. Now I have two beautiful children. And that's fine.
Yeah, and that's all good. It's all good. You don't have to answer to anybody because they're not in your shoes. And even if you were sitting across from a woman who lost her husband and her baby, our experiences would be so different.
And what I tell the ladies in my widows group too is that, like, just because you open your heart again, it doesn't mean you love your person any less that you lost. Like, you can still, it's just like your kids. Like, when you have another child after your first, you don't love them any more or less than the other. It's just different, and you just love them. Yeah. And that's how I explain it to them all the time.
Well, we've had this conversation off air, and I didn't feel comfortable sharing it until this moment, and I'm going to go ahead and share it. But Grace was in a relationship. And
I wanted to ask you, but I didn't want to, like, pry. I was like, you will come in with this if you are ready.
Yeah, and I do feel like I'm ready. Her boyfriend has moved on. He is
Move forward.
Yeah. Well, and this is where my feelings will come out, because I am hurt. And that's just the honest truth. And I find
myself asking about him to you. Like, I'll pop in every now and then, like, how is he doing, or how does this make you
get
feel?
It, and I don't get it. I have not buried a partner, and that I don't have that connection to how it feels. So what I do have a connection to is my child. Yes. And she was so in love, and she was so happy, and he was her everything. He checked all the boxes. Like I've mentioned before, I have her cell phone, and she would post memes about, like, her Prince Charming, and this guy was the Prince Charming. He checked all the boxes. So when our old normal was going on, I would tell people, I am so blessed because I love my kids' people, their friends, their significant others. It's just a huge thing for a family to feel like when these new people come into the family that you love them because of the way they love your child, you know, and that was a big, proud, thankful, gracious feeling I had about that. The night of the crash, he got the notification on his phone, and he sat on that highway for 2.5 hours.
There, right?
Yeah, so she wasn't alone. He couldn't get close to the car. But he didn't leave. He stayed there until they were able to, because he wasn't a next of kin yet, because they weren't married, but he stayed there until they had talked to us, and I talked to him, and I knew his mom was caring for him and his cousin, and he could leave after they said it was okay to leave. So none of that changes my feelings towards him, because it's like a whole bubble of a different story. It's like all of the before stuff.
He loved her too, and he got thrown into another reality that he never asked for. He never wanted it. He would have still been by her side every single day.
I believe that too. I believe that too. But the after in my head is, I didn't die with my child. She thought she was going to be married, and he found a new person. So I am just being very transparent, probably more transparent than I should be, honestly. But listening to your story has made me see his story differently.
And it's helped me understand how my past in-laws that I have no relationship with, who were nasty to me before I met Brett, but it helped me understand how it could make them even more bitter, I guess, than what they already were. It helps me understand, like getting to hear your take.
Well, and I'm glad we have each other for that reason, because it is an evolving headspace, heart space maybe is more accurate, because it did hurt my heart so badly when I found out. But
there's no way for you to move forward without her. Like, there's you can't have another kid to replace her. And it's not like her fiance was replacing her either, but there's still an ability for him to move forward and make that next step. But as a mom, you don't have that. And so I go back and say all the time that, like, I grieved Corey first. And as a mom, it sounds rough to admit that out loud. But, like, I feel, I mean, I haven't stopped grieving Corey, don't get me wrong. But, like, it doesn't hurt as bad as it once did. However, Parker, every year on his birthday for the last 10 years, I am stuck in bed no matter how hard I try with the worst anxiety attack. Like, that doesn't go away.
Because what would he be doing now? How old would he be now? What would he be playing sports? Who would his best friend be? Like, as a mom, and I do that with Grace. I think, would she have babies by now? What would her wedding dress have looked like?
No one can fill her shoes.
No. And so I did feel resentful. Like, oh, that's cool. You get to move on. I don't. And nor would I want to. I will be sitting in this grief for Grace for the rest of my life. So my boys, both of them, were, because they are closer in his age.
How old is he?
He's 25 now, but he was 23 when it happened. And so my boys were both like, just because he's found someone doesn't erase the love he had for Grace.
Well, that, and then like being able to sit back and be like, if it was your 23-year-old son waiting on his fiance, what would you tell him? You know what I mean? And
or if it were Grace who lost a fiance, would I tell her, I want you to find somebody new. I want you to be happy. I want you to, but that, I think that was my first experience with letting myself feel what I felt. Because I needed to be angry. I needed to be angry at him because he broke my heart for her. But she is fine. She's fine. If she were here, her heart would be broke, but she's not. So
and he wouldn't have probably done this to find anyone else if she was still here anyways. And so it's hard.
I learned to focus on the good. I learned to focus on how happy she made him, how happy he made her.
She made him, same.
Both, and how because it was even hard for me, I got to a point where in my pictures, if he was in them, I would crop him out. Like, I'm gonna that. If you're gonna erase her, I'm gonna erase you. That was my revenge. I guess
too, like, playing devil's advocate here, not that he's the devil or anything.
No, I know what
but
you
I
mean.
felt like I needed to protect him.
No.
Like, we don't get to see like how much this is affecting him on the daily either. Like, even though he has somebody that'll hold him at night now, like, we don't get to see the tears that she has to wipe, or if the ways that they're honoring her that we may not get to see, or the way that it affects their relationship moving forward, because he'll never get to be the same person he was with her.
So the other thing was, I felt like he walked away from our family because like I said, we love our friends, our kids' friends, and our kids' people. We include them in our family. So we have, even though they weren't married yet, he's still in our family pictures. He's still, he will always be a part of our family because Grace loved him so much. So Grace was also my twin, and she had a lot of the same mannerisms. Yes. The other day when I was listening to her phone and her voice, Tom, my husband, said, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, that wasn't me. It was Grace, because our voices are so similar. Our mannerisms were so similar. And he told me the first Christmas, he did spend that Christmas. So it happened, in April, but he did spend that first Christmas with us. And at one point he said, "It's so hard for me to talk to you because I see her."
Yeah.
And so then those visits became fewer and fewer. At the beginning, we were talking all the time. And he's probably
trying to protect you. He doesn't want to hurt you.
And I think it was hurting him to see me because it was such a reminder of
It's probably another thing. Part of his surviving again is detaching and or disassociating, and when he sees you, it's real again. Right. You know what I mean? You can't.
And really, honestly, if I'm being fair, and I say this all the time in victim impact panels, my anger has turned into, I can maybe detach the anger from being human and say, those were babies in that car. No matter how angry I am, they were very, very young. Their brains weren't developed yet. Same with him, very, very young. Would I want him to be miserable for the remainder of his life, no matter how long it is? No, I would not. I'm human. There's no way I would want him to be miserable, but it doesn't lessen my anger.
Grace's mom, you miss it for her.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
And I feel that's probably relatable for Corey's family too. I want to say ours happened in September. I do remember stopping by their house that first Christmas, and it was just a toxic relationship. It wasn't good. I would say that was probably one of the better things that came from this, is that I got to separate from that side, because it was just so toxic for me, and it was so stressful, and it was anything but supportive. So I still try to check in from time to time.
People told me at the beginning, and I'm sure you've heard this expression before, but people have said maybe God was protecting Grace from something worse in the future. And that expression used to make me furious too, because I thought everything was good. There was nothing bad. So protecting her from what? Right. And so with you saying that's what triggered that thought in my head with that side of the family, maybe in some sense it protected you as well, especially with a little boy that would be growing up around them.
Yeah, it would be really hard to have to commingle a son still with them. It wouldn't have, I can't see a way to where that would have ever worked out, because as time has went on, I've learned how to develop boundaries and take care of myself.
And you weren't there yet.
No, I was still young and super naive to the world, and so kind and quiet still. But as I've shared,
and we don't have crystal balls, so we don't know what that future would have held. So I think that's where that comment about protecting her from something hurt me so much and made me so mad, because I was like, why are you trying to envision something worse than what already happened? Because that's what it felt like. But of course, people were just trying to help. It was one of those comments,
trying to find those silver linings, which is what's helped me survive so much, because I often told myself in the beginning, just to survive, that they didn't feel any pain, they weren't scared, and that helped me. And I was I always told people it could have been so much worse, and they're like, how could it be worse than burying your whole family? But at the end of the day, it could have, because I feel like if Corey would have lived as a vegetable or wheelchair bound, he would have been miserable. He would not have been happy at all. And that, especially him driving and losing a child, and I wouldn't have wanted that for him, that would have been worse for him.
What if Grace had lived and he walked away because he couldn't see her that way? That, I think we could go down a rabbit hole, and I do some days, thinking about the what ifs and the different circumstances that would have made it different or worse or better. But I also think that that's why, I don't want to say for the second time in this podcast why this podcast is important, because but it is one of the things that I do think is important, because I don't know what listeners are going through, and I don't know if they've been affected by a drunk driver or if they've experienced loss like we have. And I think that us telling our different perspectives about it. Yeah. We said at the beginning we wanted to give people hope, and we wanted to shine the light on cases that involve drunk driving and how to get rid of it from our world. And I think we're doing that, even because I didn't want to discuss that relationship with him, but I felt today like it was time, and it's important, and I'm glad I brought it up. And I think the longer we do this, there will be other things that we'll be able to talk about. We have our things that are hidden in our vaults that we share with only our own brains or our spouses, and that's okay too. I think there's a place for that, but as time goes on, I hope that it becomes something that's more socially acceptable to talk about your loss, because I don't think it is yet.
I've tried so hard throughout this journey just to be vulnerable and raw and real. So even if I'm having a bad day, I try to share that, because I think social media just paints this highlight reel, and it looks like everyone's successful and everyone's happy. Right. Everyone has the perfect house and the perfect family. But in reality, people are struggling and they don't truly have it all. It just looks that way. So I've tried to be a little rare in an extent of sharing how I felt, especially early on, so then people knew that there were real, raw emotions, and just because I accepted my reality that no matter how much I cried or got mad, they just weren't coming back. It kind of makes sense, to them why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Not that I have to explain myself to anyone, but it helped, it helped share those raw moments, and for me to show that not everything is happy and good all the time. Right. But it can be. Yeah. There can be good moments. Yeah. Joy and sadness can coexist. Absolutely. I say that in our widows group all the time that I'm a part of, that joy and sadness can coexist. And just because you get to a point in your life to where you laugh and you smile again, it doesn't mean you love your person any less. You're allowed to be happy.
And that's beautiful. That's so true. I sound like a preschool teacher when I say this, because I was for 25 years. But Inside Out, the movie,
yes, I love that. My
says
kids love it.
That exact line, with joy and sadness, where I go, you go.
Yes.
And that's a really beautiful balance. And I think that there is beauty in mourning the people that are not here anymore. And it's just an expression of our love. And someday, I think that people will be more on board with it. It makes so many people uncomfortable right now.
Yeah. It's not a fun topic to talk about. Drinking and driving, death, grief, all of it. They're all yucky topics that we just don't want. You want to avoid it. You want to turn your head and pretend it's not happening, because that's easier. But the more we face this head on and the louder we get about it, I feel like the bigger the difference is going to be, and the changes can finally take place.
So this is an awkward off-script thing too that you didn't know I was going to ask.
I like it.
But last podcast, the one before that, we talked about each other. We interviewed each other, and it was fun and light. And there were some parts that I cried, but that's joy and sadness. But we decided to put on our Facebook page questions. Yes. So we want people to ask questions about our journey, or about our healing, or about beyond the headlights and what's in the future or whatever.
Be nosy like me. Yeah. Be so nosy.
So have you got any responses?
I haven't really gotten any questions
yet. Me either.
So start asking us questions. We want you guys to be nosy. I feel like my biggest questions, especially in the beginning though, was just what happened to the driver in the car, because I don't give her a lot of attention or limelight. I felt like she got more attention than she deserved just by existing. That's probably hard and cold, but it is what it is.
Well, and I'm going to just leave it on a cliffhanger. If you want to know about mine, you can just watch the podcast.
Yeah. Listen to the
podcast.
Watch the podcast. Watch the documentary.
That's what I was trying to say. My brain today has been so, I did a victim impact panel on Tuesday.
Those are so tough.
It was tougher than usual. And I think this is why. So, and I felt very proud of myself for explaining it this way to somebody who has not had this type of journey.
Yeah.
So I was saying the reason that victim impact panel was so hard was because I've watched bits of the body cam footage.
Yeah.
So when the instant the grief happens, the bad thing happens, I feel like the analogy is your brain like scatters, it fragments, and you've got bits and pieces of it floating all over. It's still all in there, but it's not connected anymore.
Yeah.
And so that grief brain fog is a real thing. Like you just cannot think. I remember when the officer said, when he was at our house and he said start making calls, I couldn't.
You're like, who? Why?
How would I call? How would I do that? Who would I call? And why would I wake them up at 1:30 in the morning to tell them this? And so that's like an example of how fragmented I was. But then it was all starting to come back together a little bit. And then I watched some of the body cam footages, even though everybody said don't do it. And I felt like I was at a point where I could.
To. Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't have.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Right. So all of those pieces re-fragmented.
Yeah.
So when I was up there talking, that was the first time I've talked since I've watched bits of it.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
When I was talking in my head, I was like, just focus on the story. But the story is different now because now it wasn't my imagination. Now I see things.
You didn't piece it together. You didn't. Yeah,
I see the actual things because I saw them on the body cam. So when I was telling this person that, it was like myself telling myself out loud what was going on, and myself was like, oh right, that is what happened. And that is how I still feel. Like my brain is still fragmented, it's still all separated. So I feel like on this podcast you might hear how fragmented I am again, but I'm trying to pull it all back in, and over time
I feel like
it will come back.
oftentimes though, like we just go off on tangents, but it shows that we're real people. We're real moms who have been through some real stuff, and at the end of the day, we're just real people.
And what we're saying is important, regardless of if we go off script or not, because it was meant to. It was meant to be said.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
So I want to know how you want to handle this.
Yeah, so we're super excited to announce that we finally have more details in place for our Beyond the Headlights documentary premiere that is happening. We wanted to try to get a date much sooner, but this was just meant to be how it was meant to be. And so mark your calendars for August 6th from 5 to 8 because we will be showcasing or premiering our documentary that shares both of our stories at Marcus Theater in Dardine Prairie, Missouri. We only have a limited number of tickets, so we will hopefully have a link for you soon, so stay tuned. So you can get those tickets. But the film, it's real, it's raw, it's rooted in love, loss, and the fight to end drunk driving. It's good for, honestly, anyone in the community. Community officials, police officers, teenagers, just your family. You know, I would probably steer clear from bringing young children because it is real, it is raw, it's impactful. If you haven't seen the trailers yet, you definitely need to do so.
Yeah, those are on our Facebook page, both Destiny's page and my page individually, but also on the Beyond the Headlights page. And MAD will be at the event. They will have a booth and like a photo op opportunity. They'll have resources. And so if your little ones, if you don't feel, whatever age you feel like is comfortable, there will be stuff that you could take home for kids that are age appropriate for education. And also the Missouri Highway State Patrol will be there, and they will have some resources as well.
That's great. We plan on getting some swag bags as well. So if you are a company that is listening or has a business that creates customized goods, we would love to talk with you. We like to support our local community in any way that we can, and we will have swag bags for all attendees. And then something that I am most excited for is that we're going to have a back to school school supplies drive, just so again we can give back to the community, spread Parker, Corey, and Gracie's kindness, celebrate their birthdays, and just help our local community. We will be setting up an Amazon wish list, a Walmart wish list, just in case you can't attend. We'll have boxes set up around the community as well, and you'll get to see the fruit of our labor for this school supplies drive at the documentary. I've done this in years past, and we've had school supplies come from Australia and New Zealand and just
I love that.
over in the United Kingdom and like just Europe in general. And it's just been amazing to watch the support that I have gotten for previous like school supplies drives or toy drives for Parker's birthday in the past.
Yeah.
It just feels so I don't know. It just feels so special. You know?
It is so special. And the idea of bringing all of us together for this cause, which can impact anybody, it goes beyond. Yeah, it does. For anybody to be affected by a drunk driver, it doesn't discriminate based on your race, your gender, your wealth status. Anybody can be affected by this. So it's just important for us to support each other and to be there for each other. Yeah. So I think it's going to be fun. I think so. I think the documentary will be pretty raw. Yeah. But I think the event itself will be really fun.
Absolutely. I don't know. It's going to be an amazing time. Definitely mark your calendar again for August 6th. It's in Dardine Prairie, which is what would you say? Like O'Fallon area for people, Lake St. Louis area for
definitely.
People in Missouri that are local.
Yep.
But it's going to be worthwhile. And like I said, we have a limited number of tickets. We want to fill the theater. We requested the biggest theater room they have, and I am confident that every seat will be filled with the people who need to see it most.
Yeah. So we'll have more information on that to come. And also just start thinking of questions to ask us, because we would love to have audience participation and maybe have some things asked that we hadn't thought to talk about.
Share the podcast with your friends and family. Every time you like or comment or interact with us, it just shows that we're loved and supported, and then it also helps this get to even more people. So there are so many ways that you can support us that doesn't cost anything, and it's just honestly by showing us the love.
Yep. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
We hope today's episode brought you comfort, understanding, and a renewed sense of hope. If you found value in our conversation, please consider sharing this podcast with someone who might benefit from it.
Until next time, hold on to hope, honor the memories of those that you love, and take one step at a time toward healing. You're not alone on this path. Take care and be well.